The easiest way to understand MoviePass is to stand at the box office with someone else's card. You want to see a movie. The theater wants to sell a ticket. The ticket has a real price. Then MoviePass steps in and says, pay us a small monthly fee, use our app, use our card, and go to the movies again. For the customer, it feels almost too simple. For the company, every part of that sentence matters. The customer pays a fixed subscription. The ticket price is variable. The more the customer goes, the more value the customer gets. The more the customer goes, the more ticket cost MoviePass may have to carry. That is the contradiction that made MoviePass famous. Demand was not missing, the product was not hard to explain. The problem was that the best version of the customer experience could be the hardest version of the business to fund. MoviePass was a theater subscription service. In the HMNY filing record, the simple version was this. Subscribers could get access to one movie per day at participating theaters, subject to availability, for a fixed monthly or annual fee. The mechanics were easy to understand. A subscriber used the MoviePass app. The app helped choose a movie and theater. In many cases, the customer used a MoviePass debit card or supported app flow to buy the ticket. That made the product feel like a permission slip. Going to the movies stopped feeling like a special purchase every time. It started feeling like something you had already paid for. That is powerful. It also changes customer behavior. If a ticket usually feels expensive, the subscriber thinks twice. If the subscription is already paid, the calculation changes. The customer can try a smaller movie. The customer can go on a weeknight. The customer can see something they would have skipped. From the outside, that looked like exactly what the theater business needed. More attendance, more habit, more reasons to leave the house, and for a moment, the growth looked extraordinary. HMNY's 2017 Form 10-K said MoviePass surpassed 1 million paying subscribers in December 2017. It passed 1.5 million in January 2018. It passed 2 million in February 2018. That is the kind of chart that makes a company feel inevitable. It is also the kind of chart that can hide the most important question. Who pays when those customers use the bargain exactly as advertised? The obvious story is that MoviePass found a giant audience. That part was true enough to matter. People wanted the product. The sharper story is that customer love did not remove the ticket cost. It moved the cost into MoviePass. A fixed price subscription can work when usage is predictable, margins are wide enough, or low usage customers balance high usage customers. Gyms are the easy example. A gym can sell many memberships because every member will not show up every day, and each workout does not require the gym to buy a new retail product for that member. MoviePass was different. Every movie ticket was a real transaction inside a real theater system. HMNY's 2017 filing said MoviePass had historically paid large national exhibitors full price for each ticket purchased through the MoviePass app. It also described some discounts and hopes for exhibitor economics. The danger was written plainly in that filing. HMNY warned that MoviePass spent more to retain a subscriber than the revenue derived from that subscriber. It also said other revenue sources were then inadequate to offset or exceed those costs. That is the business model in one sentence. The company could make the customer happy and still move farther from profitability. The same filing warned that the monthly plans allowed subscribers to see a new movie each day. In most cases, it said, MoviePass paid the theaters the full cost for each movie ticket a subscriber used, so increased movie viewing by subscribers would cause significant and increasing losses per subscriber and negative cash flow. This is why the MoviePass story is easy to misunderstand. The customer did not have to behave strangely to create the problem. The customer only had to use the service. If they went once in a month, MoviePass might have room. If they went several times, the customer got a better deal and the company had more cost. If millions of subscribers understood that bargain, the product could become more expensive as it became more popular. That makes subscriber growth a complicated signal. Growth can prove that the product has demand. It does not automatically prove that the price makes sense. In 2017, HMNY reported about $5.9 million in subscription revenue and about $10.4 million in total revenue. It reported about $20.5 million in cost of revenues. The result was about $10.1 million of gross loss, about $56 million of loss from operations, and about $150.8 million of net loss. Those numbers were company-wide, and HMNY had several accounting complications. They still matter because they show the stress around the MoviePass expansion. Then 2018 made the gap harder to ignore. For the first quarter of 2018, HMNY reported about $49.4 million in total revenues. It reported about $136 million in cost of revenue. Gross loss was about $86.5 million. Loss from operations was about $107.7 million. Think about what that means at the product level. The public saw a service everyone was talking about. The filing showed a company where the cost line was much larger than the revenue line. The popular interpretation was that MoviePass only needed enough scale. More subscribers could mean more theater partnerships, more data, more marketing power, more ways to send customers toward movies that needed audiences. MoviePass itself talked about these possibilities. It described marketing and targeting services, distributor relationships, and data collected from subscriber behavior. Those ideas were not irrelevant. They were part of the pitch. But the filing record also shows the timing problem. Those other revenue sources were not yet enough to carry the ticket costs. The ticket bill was immediate. The dream of making money around the subscriber was slower, less certain, and dependent on other parties. In a model like this, time is expensive. Every month, the company waits for better economics. Customers keep using the product. Every customer who uses it heavily turns the wait into cash pressure. By mid-2018, MoviePass had the kind of growth slide founders dream about. HMNY's second quarter 2018 filing said the service had about 1 million subscribers in December 2017. By June 30th, 2018, it had about 3 million subscribers. As of August 10th, it had about 3.2 million subscribers. That number should feel impressive. It should also feel dangerous. For the second quarter of 2018, HMNY reported about $74.2 million in total revenues. Cost of revenue was about $178.8 million. Gross loss was about $104.6 million. For the first 6 months of 2018, the pattern was even clearer. About $123.6 million in total revenues and about $314.7 million in cost of revenue. The subscriber count was climbing. The economic gap was not politely waiting for the company to catch up. The balance sheet showed pressure too. At June 30th, 2018, HMNY had about $15.5 million of cash on hand. It also had a working capital deficit of about $84.9 million. Working capital can sound abstract. In plain English, it means near-term obligations were pressing harder than near-term resources. For a subscription app, that pressure eventually reaches the user. Before that happens, it reaches the pipes that make the transaction work. A MoviePass customer did not see the processor relationship. They saw an app, a card, and a theater. But the app and card depended on processors who had to keep handling payments. On July 27, 2018, HMNY filed an 8K saying it had issued a demand note. The note included $5 million in cash borrowed by the company. The filing said those proceeds were used to pay merchant and fulfillment processors. Then the filing made the risk visible. If the company could not make required payments to those processors, the processors could stop processing payments for MoviePass. That would cause a MoviePass service interruption. The filing said such an interruption occurred on July 26, 2018. That was the business model reaching the customer experience. The promise had always felt simple from the outside. Pay monthly, pick a movie, get a ticket. Now the company had to manage a more painful reality. The cheaper and more useful the service felt, the more carefully MoviePass had to control cost. The next version of the story was no longer about pure growth, it was about restriction. By the third quarter of 2018, HMNY described MoviePass as allowing subscribers to see up to 3 movies a month, from a schedule of select movies, for a low fixed price. That was a very different emotional product. 1 movie per day feels like freedom. 3 movies a month from a selected schedule feels like management. Management may have been necessary. It may have reduced the cost problem, but it also changed the reason customers had joined. HMNY's third quarter filing said changes to the MoviePass service offering resulted in subscriber losses. It also said those changes lowered expected financial results from the business. MoviePass began converting annual subscribers to the 3 movies per month plan, with annual subscribers given the option to cancel or refund their annual plan. That is the brutal part of a promise-led business. The original promise attracts the customer. The restricted promise protects the company. But the restricted promise may not be the product customers fell in love with. The financial statements still looked painful. For the third quarter of 2018, HMNY reported about $81.3 million in total revenues, about $109.6 million in cost of revenue, about $28.3 million of gross loss, and about $137.2 million of net loss. For the 9 months ended September 30th, 2018, HMNY reported about $205 million in total revenues. Cost of revenue was about $424.4 million. Gross loss was about $219.4 million. Net loss was about $246.9 million. These are the numbers behind the feeling that the product was falling apart. The app issues, the plan changes, and the service interruptions were not random oddities floating above the business. They were connected to the same central mismatch. Customers wanted the version of MoviePass that was expensive to honor. By 2019, the promise had collapsed from a theater habit into a financing problem. On September 13th, 2019, HMNY said its board had formed a strategic review committee. The committee would explore alternatives including a sale of the company, a sale of substantially all assets, a business reorganization, or other extraordinary transactions. The same filing said MoviePass would interrupt service for all subscribers effective September 14, 2019, while the company continued efforts to seek financing. That sentence is quiet, but it is the end of the customer story. A subscription that began as permission to go to the movies had become a service that could not keep operating while the company searched for cash. Then came the formal end of the HMNY era company. On January 28, 2020, HMNY, MoviePass Incorporated, and Zone Technologies filed voluntary Chapter 7 petitions in the Southern District of New York. Chapter 7 matters. It is not a turnaround filing. It is the legal path for liquidation. The later regulatory story added another layer. In 2021, the Federal Trade Commission announced a settlement. It alleged that MoviePass took steps to block subscribers from using the service as advertised. It also alleged that MoviePass failed to secure subscriber data. The FTC described 3 usage-limiting tactics: password invalidations, a ticket verification program, and tripwires that blocked certain groups of users after cost thresholds were hit. Those allegations should be attributed carefully. They are not needed to prove the basic economic story. The filings had already shown that heavy usage was financially dangerous to MoviePass. But the FTC material matters for one reason. It shows what can happen when a company sells a usage promise and then becomes financially desperate to reduce usage. In 2022, the Department of Justice announced charges against former executives. The DOJ alleged that the $9.95 unlimited plan had been represented as tested, sustainable, and profitable or break-even on subscription fees alone, while MoviePass was losing money from the plan. The DOJ also alleged misleading statements about data and artificial intelligence capabilities. The DOJ release itself said an indictment is an allegation and defendants are presumed innocent unless proven guilty. Later reporting in 2024 and 2025 described guilty pleas by Mitchell Lowe and Theodore Farnsworth. This episode does not rely on those later legal outcomes to make the core point. The core point is already visible in the operating record. MoviePass was a product that worked for the customer before it worked as a business. That is different from saying low prices always fail. A low price can work if the company has a cost advantage, a repeat purchase engine, a bigger bundle, or a second revenue stream that is already strong enough. A low price can be a real strategy. MoviePass had a different problem. It made a promise where the customer's incentive and the company's cost line pointed in opposite directions. The customer wanted to see more movies. The company needed enough customers to pay while not using enough tickets to overwhelm the economics or enough outside revenue to cover the difference. That is a narrow path. It gets narrower when the marketing teaches customers to love the most expensive version of the product. That is why the cheap ticket story is too small. MoviePass did not merely sell a discount, it sold the feeling that going to the theater could become casual again. That feeling was real for customers. It made people talk about movies. It made the subscription feel like a little rebellion against ticket prices. It turned an ordinary night at the theater into something that felt prepaid and easy. The tragedy, in business terms, is that the product's emotional clarity was ahead of its financial structure. Customers understood the offer. They used it. The more they used it, the more MoviePass had to confront the cost of keeping the promise. That is the failure engine. First, the subscription made moviegoing feel free at the moment of use. Second, that feeling encouraged more usage. Third, more usage pushed real ticket costs back onto MoviePass. Fourth, the hoped-for extra revenue did not arrive fast enough or large enough to offset the cost. Fifth, cash pressure forced the company into interruptions, restrictions, and a smaller version of the promise. Sixth, the smaller promise weakened the customer story that had created the growth. MoviePass looked like proof that people still wanted to go to the movies. It was proof of something more specific. People wanted a version of moviegoing where someone else absorbed the ticket price anxiety. For a while, MoviePass was that someone else. The business could not remain that someone else forever.